17 years ago, my father slammed the door in my face and told me I was no longer his daughter. That night, standing in the rain with a single duffel bag, I stopped being Amara Whitfield, the obedient child, and became the girl he erased. His words carved a wound so deep it never fully closed. If you want to fly, do it without me. I built a life from that exile. But nothing prepared me for what happened when I walked back into his world at my brother's wedding. The foghorns from Camden Harbor moaned through the morning mist, mixing with the sharp smell of coffee that filled my kitchen. Light seeped weakly through the window, heavy with that gray, damp chill New England always carries in the fall. I sat at the counter with an envelope in my hands, the words pressed across the front in looping cursive, Whitfield family. My fingers trembled as I slid it open. Inside lay a wedding invitation, cream cardstock edged with gold, announcing that my younger brother, Matthew, was marrying Hannah in 2 weeks' time. And there it was, in careful print, the word that hit harder than the cold air seeping in through the window frame. Family. After 17 years of silence, after being thrown out and cut off, somehow I was still listed as family. A rush of heat spread through my chest, equal parts anger and ache. Was I really family? Or just a name they couldn't edit out without raising questions? I stared at the word until the letters blurred, then lifted my eyes to the framed photograph on the wall. It showed the rescue helicopter I'd flown a dozen times into storms and chaos. That machine had been more of a home to me than the house I'd been forced out of. The shrill buzz of my phone shattered the moment. One new message, no name attached, just the blunt words flashing on the screen. Don't come. Don't embarrass him. I froze, the pulse in my throat pounding against my skin. I didn't need to ask who him was. Only one man had the power to send those words slicing through me like glass. My father. I set the phone down slowly, the silence in the room so thick I could hear my own breathing. Then I let out a shaky laugh, bitter at first, but sharp with resolve. Tearing the message into digital nothing, I whispered to the empty room. I'm going. Not for him. For Matthew, and for what Hannah already knows. On the counter beside the invitation, I placed a small object I always kept hidden at the back of a drawer. A strip of medical gauze, stained and stiff with old salt water. The fabric had saved someone's life once, and its story was mine alone. For now, its presence was a quiet promise that the past wasn't finished with me yet. The night comes back to me in fragments. The heavy reek of my father's cigarettes. The grit of concrete dust still clinging to his shirt from the job site. The slam of papers on the kitchen table. He didn't even bother sitting down. A manila folder skidded across the wood toward me, its corners bent. My name typed neatly at the top of every form inside. Law, accounting, business, every path but the one I had already chosen. I stood clutching a letter that felt heavier than stone, the acceptance into the air medical training program I'd been dreaming of for years. My hands shook as I held it out, like a child offering proof she was worth keeping. He didn't glance at it. His eyes stayed cold, locked on mine. This house isn't raising a sky taxi driver, he said flatly, voice laced with disdain. I swallowed hard, heart pounding in my ears. I'm choosing the sky, I whispered. It was the first time in my life I'd ever contradicted him. The silence that followed was colder than the rain tapping against the kitchen windows. Then he walked to the front door, pulled it open, and without raising his voice said, You want to fly? Fine. Start by surviving without me. Get out! My mother burst into tears, rushing to him, clutching his arm, begging through broken sobs. Her voice was drowned by the thunder outside and his stony refusal to soften. On the staircase, Matthew hovered, pale and stricken, his eyes darting between us, loyalty to our father weighing heavier than the apology he couldn't say aloud. I remember the sound of my own breath, shallow, as if the walls of the house themselves had pushed me out. I lifted the strap of my duffel bag, heavy with nothing more than a few clothes, a pair of worn sneakers, and the folded acceptance letter pressed deep in the side pocket. The rain hit like needles when I stepped outside. My jacket clung to my skin, soaked through within seconds. Behind me, the door slammed shut, the echo sealing the fracture that would split 17 years wide. The air smelled of wet cement and smoke, and I knew even then it would haunt me forever. I tightened my grip on the bag, set my jaw, and walked into the storm. Every step in the dark, I repeated one vow in my head. From now on, every mile I run will be my answer. Back in the present, I sat at my small kitchen table with my flight log open, pages filled with scrawled notes from missions that blurred together. One entry caught my eye, dated October 2012. My handwriting leaned urgent, cramped by adrenaline. Cliff rescue, female, 16 to 17, hypothermia risk. The memory snapped back sharp as salt spray. A storm off the coast, winds battering the rotor blades, ropes whipping as I rappelled down the slick face of a cliff. The girl clung desperately to the rocks, her knuckles bloodless, eyes wide with terror. I could feel the vibration of her shivering through the rope as I hooked onto her harness. I pressed my forehead against hers, locking her gaze in the howl of the wind. "Breathe with me. Just look at me. Don't let go." My voice was calm, though my own arms burned from the strain. Inch by inch, we rose together, the sea clawing at our heels, until finally the winch lifted us clear. By the time we reached the chopper, my hands were raw, the strip of gauze I'd wrapped around her arm soaked stiff with seawater. I still keep that strip, faded and brittle, tucked away like a secret only I understand. Later, I'd received a message. Just a short note from someone signing only as H. Words of gratitude for saving her life. For years, I never knew who she was. I carried the mystery like an unanswered question. It wasn't until a few weeks before Matthew's wedding that the truth landed like another storm. Hannah, his bride, was the girl from that cliff. She looked me in the eye, her voice steady but full of weight. "You saved me once, and I've never forgotten. Tomorrow, I'm going to tell them. Everyone needs to know who you are." The rehearsal dinner smelled of garlic butter and scallops, the kind of scent that clung to your clothes long after you'd left. Country music played low under the hum of conversation, glasses clinking, silverware chiming against plates. I smoothed the skirt of the simple dress I'd chosen, neat but unassuming, and took my seat halfway down the table. At the head, my father leaned back with the air of a man who owned not just the room, but the entire town. He swirled his glass of wine, eyes narrowing at me before his mouth twisted into a half smile. "Flying in circles all day," he drawled, loud enough for everyone to hear. "What good does that really do for anyone?" The room froze. Forks hovered mid-air. Every gaze turned toward me, waiting for a reaction. Then, a woman near the end of the table set her napkin down and spoke, her voice carrying with a steady conviction. "You're Amara Whitfield, aren't you? The life flight pilot? You flew my husband in last year when his heart stopped. He's alive today because of you." A murmur rippled through the guests. For a fleeting second, warmth filled the silence, recognition, gratitude. But my father cut it short with a sharp shake of his head. "Don't exaggerate," he snapped. "It's a reckless stunt job, nothing more. Don't paint it as something noble." Another voice joined in, rough but respectful. One of his old firehouse friends leaned forward, meeting his eyes. "Robert, it's dangerous work, and it matters. You know it does." Color rose up my father's neck. He barked back. "Not in this family it doesn't. We don't call that a profession." Beneath the table, Hannah's hand found mine. A small squeeze, quick but firm, her whisper hidden under the scrape of chairs. "Tomorrow," she said. "I'll tell them." I lifted my glass of wine, let the tartness settle on my tongue, and smiled. Not in defiance, but in calm. No retort, no scene. just the quiet strength of someone who had weathered storms harsher than this. Across the table, my father's stare burned into me, trying to crush me as he always had. But this time, I didn't flinch. I'd already learned how to stand steady in the eye of a hurricane. Later that night, the wind screamed down the coast, rattling the thin window panes of the small inn where I was staying. I sat alone at the desk, the ocean's roar crashing in time with the pulse in my ears. In front of me lay a wooden box I hadn't opened in years. Its hinges creaked as if even they carried the weight of memory. Inside, folded carefully, was a letter from my mother. The paper had yellowed, her handwriting delicate but unwavering. Hope is the thing with feathers. She'd left it for me in her final days. A whisper of faith pressed into ink when her voice could no longer carry the words. Beneath it, another envelope, never sealed. The letter I had once written to my father, inviting him to watch me receive a medal for distinguished service. My words blurred where tears had fallen years ago. I had never sent it. He had never known. I reached for my phone, almost on instinct, and scrolled back to the message that had clawed at me earlier. Don't come. Don't embarrass him. Tonight I traced it to its source, and the truth landed like a punch to the ribs. The number belonged to one of his spare phones. It had been him all along. My hands shook, but not from fear. Anger steadied me. He hadn't just denied me. He wanted to erase me completely, to keep me invisible even here, at my own brother's wedding. I captured the screen, the damning evidence, and stored it away. Then I deleted the thread, not as surrender, but as choice. Tomorrow would speak louder than any reply I could send. One by one, I returned the letters to the box. On top, I laid the strip of salt-stained gauze, brittle now with age. 3 relics, stacked like layers of my life. My mother's hope, my father's absence, and the life I had fought to save when no one believed in me. I closed the lid gently, the storm outside clawing at the walls, and whispered into the dark. Tomorrow, the truth will stand on its own. The old boathouse had been transformed with strings of golden lights and white blooms tucked into every corner. But the smell of salt water still clung to the beams. Waves slapped against the pilings below, the wind outside rising with the kind of restless energy that warned of a storm moving in. Guests laughed, glasses clinked, and for a moment the celebration carried on as if nothing dark hovered on the horizon. Then my father rose, wineglass in hand, his voice cutting through the music like a blade. Some people think flying in circles all day counts as serving the community, he said, letting the pause stretch. To me, it's nothing but showing off. The room stilled. Eyes flicked toward me, curious, unsettled. From across the tables, a woman stood, her voice trembling but fierce. That's not true. She flew my husband to the hospital when his heart gave out. If not for her, he wouldn't be alive tonight. Murmurs spread, heads nodding, the tide of opinion shifting. My father's jaw tightened. Coincidence, he snapped. Don't make her into something she's not. His tone faltered, though the first crack in his certainty. Just then my phone buzzed in my pocket. I slid it open under the table. An emergency alert from the weather center. High winds, widespread outages expected. A storm was coming. I silenced it and slipped the phone away, steadying my breath. At the center of the dance floor, Hannah stepped forward, a microphone trembling in her hands. Her eyes swept the room before landing on me. Before we dance, she said softly, I need to tell you something. The chatter died instantly. The entire hall fell into silence. The band stopped mid-note. Only the wind outside and the restless surf filled the pause. Hannah, radiant in lace, drew a breath deep enough to steady her shaking shoulders, then looked straight at me. 10 years ago, she began, her voice clear though her hands clutched the mic. I was stranded on a cliff in a storm. I thought I was going to die. Then a young woman lowered herself down on a rope, pressed her forehead to mine, and told me, breathe with me, look at me. That woman is my sister-in-law tonight. Gasps rippled through the room. The stillness held like a held breath. Hannah's voice grew stronger. Because of her, I lived. Because of her, I learned what courage looks like. That's why we started the Coast and Sky Fund, 23 training programs for rescue teams across Maine, all built on her call sign. The back doors opened, and suddenly, uniformed rescuers stood tall among the guests. One by one, they bowed their heads toward me. Matthew stepped forward, his voice carrying over the roar of applause beginning to rise. I asked Hannah to trace the records until she found you. You've always been my sister. This is your family, too, if you want it. Chairs scraped back as people rose to their feet. Thunderous clapping rolled like the ocean outside. Through the blur of faces and the shimmer of light, I saw only my father, rigid in his chair, knuckles white against the table's edge. I stood slowly, lifted my glass, and inclined my head. A simple nod. The ovation crashed around me like waves, but he stayed seated, alone in the eye of it. The night pressed in heavy, the wind howling off the bay, rattling the old boathouse walls. Strings of golden lights swung wildly overhead, the crash of waves pounding against the pilings like drums. Laughter still rang through the crowd when, suddenly, the room went black. A pop, then silence, broken only by startled gasps. Panic spread fast. Children cried. Voices rose. The storm outside shrieked through the cracks. Phone screens flicked on, scattering shards of light across anxious faces. Then, a scream cut through it all, sharp and terrified. A man had collapsed by the head table, his body crumpling against the floor. I rushed forward, heart hammering. In the pale glow, I saw who it was, my father's oldest friend. I dropped to my knees, fingers at his neck. His pulse was faint, then gone. "Clear the space!" I shouted, my voice slicing through the chaos. "I need light here!" My father loomed over me, frozen, blocking the beam of a phone. For a split second, we locked eyes, his wide with shock. "You're in my way," I barked. "Step back!" And for the first time in 17 years, he obeyed. Training surged through me, hands interlocked. I drove compressions into his chest. "You, get the AED. You, mouth to mouth with me, now!" A nurse in the crowd dropped beside me, following my lead. The air was thick with salt and sweat, the acrid smell of fear. Each push rattled my arms, each breath a gamble against the dark. The man's chest rose under the strobe of cell phone beams, the rhythm of my compressions matching the relentless pound of the sea. Minutes stretched, brutal and endless, until flashing red lights broke through the storm outside. Paramedics burst in, sliding a stretcher across the wet floor. Even as they loaded him, I stayed pressing down, blood and sweat streaking my sleeves. Then, suddenly, his body jerked, a cough, a gasp. Life clawed its way back. The hall was silent, breath held in unison, until a single clap started. Then another. Applause swelled slowly, rolling like thunder, like waves breaking against the shore. And I sat back on my heels, chest heaving, the taste of salt sharp on my tongue. The storm had loosened its grip, leaving only the hiss of rain sliding down the boathouse roof and the creak of timber still straining against the wind. I sat on a bench in the corridor, lungs aching from effort, my sleeves damp with sweat and blood. My pulse was still racing when I saw his shadow stretch long across the wet planks, the unmistakable shape of my father. He stopped a few feet away, his frame smaller now, his shoulders stooped in a way I had never noticed before. I pulled my phone from my pocket, the screen still glowing, and held it up for him to see. The screenshot glared back, the message that had tried to bar me from this wedding. "Don't come. Don't embarrass him." "You didn't just deny me," I said, my voice low but steady. "You tried to erase me, because you're afraid I'd make you look small." His fists curled tight, the veins standing out like old rope. For a moment I thought he'd explode, but instead his eyes flickered, wet and trembling. When he finally spoke, the words cracked apart. I don't know how to stand up anymore." Behind us, footsteps. Matthew appeared, his face pale, caught between us. "This isn't about who was right 17 years ago," he said firmly. "It's about who we decide to be tomorrow morning." Hannah emerged from the doorway, pressing a microphone into my hand. "Say something," she whispered. "The students are here. They're listening." I turned back toward the hall, toward rows of young faces still wide-eyed from the storm. I drew a breath and let the words come. "If someone throws you out the door," I said slowly, "remember, doors aren't just for leaving. They're also for coming back, once you've built your own wings." A ripple of applause broke, high-pitched claps from the children first, then deeper, heavier hands joining in. A few adults wiped their eyes. I looked back at my father. He said nothing, but for the first time, his eyes lowered, not in contempt, but in surrender. The sky was a pale wash of silver when the rotors began to turn, scattering gulls into the air with their shrill cries. I lifted the Life Flight helicopter smoothly off the pad, the bay still draped in morning fog that peeled back in slow ribbons as the sun crept higher. Beneath me, Rockport shrank to a scatter of rooftops, the docks stretching out like the bones of an old hand. The pier where my father had so often stood, commanding the harbor like it belonged to him, was now just a speck dissolving into the horizon. The vibration of the controls steadied me, a rhythm I'd trusted for years. Then my phone, strapped to the dash, lit up with a message. I glanced at the screen, my pulse catching despite myself. From his main number, the first time in nearly 2 decades. "If you want, meet me at the pier." No past. Just learning how to stand beside each other. I let the words hang there, the glow of the text bright against the morning haze. For a long moment, I didn't move, didn't type, didn't answer. Then I pressed the button, the screen going dark. Sunlight struck the windshield, painting my reflection back at me. My face was calm now. The tightness around my eyes eased. "Hold your altitude," I murmured to myself, voice lost in the thrum of the blades. The helicopter skimmed low over the bay, casting a long shadow across the rippling water. My silhouette and the aircraft's merged into one dark shape sliding over the waves, framed in light. It was more than flight, it was proof. Proof that I had built something solid, that I could stand alone, and that even the door once slammed in my face could remain open, waiting, if I ever chose to step back through.